Why did the courtroom go silent when she took off her coat? Before we begin, let me ask, how are you holding up these days? How's your family doing? I hope you're keeping strong, staying grounded, and finding a little peace in this loud and unkind world. Her name is Monica Hayes, a black woman in her 60s, gray around the edges, slow-moving with a face that doesn't flinch anymore. That morning, she wheeled into a courtroom in a battered wheelchair, wearing a frayed coat and an old knit cap. Not one person looked twice. She was just another shadow to them. But they should have looked closer. Because Monica wasn't there for shelter. She wasn't confused. She wasn't lost. She came with a mission and a name. Malik Sanders, a 14-year-old black boy arrested 15 years ago for resisting arrest. No evidence, no medical report, just a redacted file. Monica had been a DOJ agent when it happened. She stayed silent to keep her job, and a child paid the price. Now she was back, not asking for justice, delivering it. The courthouse stood like a relic of something sacred, wrapped in stone and silence. Tall white columns reached toward the sky, polished brass doors, glinting in the sun like they had nothing to hide. People passed through it every day. Judges in robes, lawyers with briefcases, officers in stiff uniforms, and the accused heads down, hands cuffed. It was a place that claimed to hold truth. But Monica Hayes had walked through too many of these halls to believe that. That morning, the air had a chill to it. Wind bit at her cheeks as she made her way up the courthouse steps in her wheelchair, one slow turn of the wheels at a time. She didn't have anyone with her, no assistant, no handler, no press, just her. And under her worn coat tucked close to her chest was her Department of Justice badge. Still real, still valid, still powerful even if no one believed it belonged to her. She didn't announce herself at the front desk. She didn't need to. She knew where she was going. She had been here before 15 years earlier. Back then, she came in through the secure entrance. Her badge scanned her title respected. She had sat in Judge Sandra Klein's chambers listening to a cold dismissal of the Sanders case. Nothing unusual, Klein had said, waving a manicured hand like she was brushing lint off her robe. Don't stir things up. And Monica had nodded, had swallowed her instincts, had let the case die. She remembered walking out that day into the sunlight feeling like her soul had shrunk. No press conference, no protest. Just another black boy whose story wouldn't be told. Now Monica returned, not as an agent on assignment, but as a woman with unfinished business. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low chatter. Court officers milled about paperwork, shuffled, and lawyers whispered to each other in the gallery. People noticed Monica, but only to judge her. Her coat was old. Her face was tired. She didn't belong. Officer Dana Whitlow, tall, white blonde ponytail tight as her jaw, noticed Monica and stepped forward. She didn't smile. She didn't offer help. "Ma'am," she said loudly so others could hear, "this isn't a shelter." A few heads turned. A couple of smirks appeared. Whitlow's hand hovered near her holster like Monica's wheelchair might lunge at her. Monica didn't respond. She kept rolling towards the courtroom door. Then she stopped slowly, reached inside her coat, and pulled out her badge. The room shifted. She didn't raise her voice when she said, "I am a senior federal investigator. I'm not here to observe. I'm here to expose." Whitlow blinked, then flushed. The tension was so thick it dragged down the air itself. A bailiff hurried over. Monica was escorted to a small surveillance room in the back where monitors replayed courtroom footage in real time. On one of the screens, Officer Whitlow captured moments ago standing with her hand near her weapon, barking at Monica like she was a threat. Monica pointed to the screen and said flatly, "That right there, that's evidence." The bailiff didn't speak. No one did. Monica opened her coat and handed over a file. Inside it was the case that brought her here, Malik Sanders. Age 14, arrested for resisting. That's all it said. No fingerprints, no camera footage. Just a police report signed by Whitlow herself and stamped by Judge Klein. And a mugshot of a terrified boy bruised alone and already vanishing from the world. 15 years ago, Monica had read that file and felt a chill crawl down her spine. She had raised concerns. She had asked quiet questions. But when the pushback came, she had folded. Her supervisor had warned her, "Don't dig into local cases. You're a federal agent, not a social worker." And she had obeyed. She had pushed the file into the do not pursue drawer and walked away. But Malik never left her. Every time she opened her wallet, there he was. That photo. Those eyes. So now Monica was back. She rolled out of the surveillance room no longer in the ragged coat. She wore a crisp navy blue suit, her badge shining on her chest like a medal or a weapon. The courtroom paused. The murmur of voices ceased. Phones were lowered. Eyes turned. Monica didn't have to say a word. Her presence transformed did the speaking for her. She rolled to the front and laid the case file on the table. "I'm not here today as a witness," she said, voice steady. "I'm here as an official representative of the Department of Justice." A woman in the back held up a tablet. On it was the video clip from minutes earlier, Whitlow threatening a woman in a wheelchair. From somewhere behind the bench, a child's voice rose softly. "Mommy." Why did they do that to her? Nobody laughed, nobody smiled, no one dared look away. And Monica, sitting at the front of the room, opened that file like it was a tomb she'd been carrying for years. The silence in the courtroom was unnatural, the kind that made people fidget in their seats and clear their throats just to break it. Monica Hayes sat like a mountain unmoving, unshaken. The weight of 15 years pressed against her shoulders, but she didn't hunch. She sat tall in that wheelchair, the badge on her chest gleaming under the sterile courtroom lights. Judge Sandra Klein peered over her glasses, face tight with disbelief. The same judge who had once brushed Monica off now faced her across the bench. Klein hadn't changed much. Her hair was grayer, her skin more drawn, but her arrogance was intact. "Miss Hayes," she said, voice clipped, "you are not listed on today's docket. What exactly are you doing in my courtroom?" Monica didn't blink. "What I should have done 15 years ago." A ripple moved through the gallery, quiet gasps, a few heads turning toward each other. Klein's jaw twitched. "This is a court of law," Klein said sharply, "not a stage for personal redemption." And yet Monica replied, "You let it become a stage for injustice. I'm simply correcting the script." Gasps turned into murmurs. Klein banged her gavel. "Order!" Monica opened the file and held up the faded mugshot of Malik Sanders. The boy's face was young, his left eye swollen, lip split. This child was arrested without evidence. There was no forensic report, no medical examination. The police report was signed by an officer who just this morning tried to eject me from the building because of how I looked. And you, Judge Klein, denied a request to reopen the case without review. "I followed protocol," Klein snapped. Monica's voice cut through like a blade. "Whose protocol? The one that makes sure black boys disappear before anyone bothers to ask questions?" The room tensed. Officer Dana Whitlow stood in the back, arms crossed, her face tight with rage and fear. She was no longer in control, and she knew it. "This is outrageous," Whitlow said loudly. "She's making unfounded accusations." That case was closed, cleared, all of it was. "Redacted," Monica interrupted. "Every word. Pages blacked out like it was classified war material. Why would you redact a juvenile misdemeanor report unless you had something to hide?" Klein turned to her bailiff. "Remove Miss Hayes." The bailiff hesitated. He looked between Klein and Monica, then back again. "Try it," Monica said calmly, "and every press contact I've ever worked with will get a copy of this file tonight, with your name on it." Klein froze. The bailiff backed away. Monica tapped the file. "I have copies and legal standing. I never resigned from the DOJ. I was put on medical leave 3 years ago. I still hold clearance. And the investigation into the Sanders case has officially been reactivated this morning." "You have no jurisdiction here," Klein barked. "Then you should have made sure that courthouse video feed wasn't saved on a federal backup server." Boom. The words echoed like a thunderclap. Klein's face blanched. Officer Whitlow stepped forward, reaching instinctively for her belt only to realize the threat was not physical. This wasn't a woman she could intimidate or arrest. This was someone who outranked her. Quietly. Legally. Unapologetically. Monica wheeled forward, placed the file on the clerk's desk, and faced the courtroom. 15 years ago, she said, I did nothing. I saw something wrong and I let it go because it was easier. Because I was afraid of losing my job, of rocking the boat, of being labeled. I let fear win. And Malik Sanders disappeared because of it. She turned toward Whitlow. You wrote the report. You arrested a child, no camera footage, no lawyer present, and you made it stick. I want you to explain that. I followed the procedures, Whitlow said through clenched teeth. No. You followed your instincts, Monica said, and those instincts saw a black boy as a threat. People in the gallery stirred some with their hands. Over their mouths, some nodding slowly, others looking down in shame. A young black man near the back wiped tears from his eyes. He wasn't the only one. Klein leaned forward, clinging to the last thread of authority. You're turning this into a circus. Monica looked her dead in the eye. No, Judge. You turned it into a cover-up. I'm turning it into a reckoning. From the gallery, an older woman stood up. She was short, wore a floral scarf and heavy glasses. My grandson was arrested in this courtroom last year for jaywalking, she said, voice trembling. He still can't get a job because of it. A man stood up next. My brother got 5 years for something the officer later admitted wasn't even his. Another voice. My niece got shoved in the back of a cruiser for mouthing off. One by one, voices rose from the silence. Not shouting, just stating the truth like air finally being led into a sealed room. For the first time, the courtroom didn't belong to the bench or the badge. It belonged to the people who had been shut out for too long. Klein banged her gavel again. This is completely unraveling, Monica finished for her. That's what happens when you stitch a system with lies. The judge's hand trembled. Monica returned to the center. Her voice, steady and low, moved through the room with the force of thunder wrapped in velvet. We're not asking for revenge, she said. We're demanding recognition. We're tired of being statistics. We're tired of being dismissed. And I am tired deep in my bones of seeing children destroyed before they even get a chance to live. Then she paused. And I'm not here to argue anymore. I'm here to finish what I started. The next morning, the courthouse didn't feel the same. The walls were still there, the flag still hung, and the seal of justice still loomed above the judge's bench, but the air was different. People whispered in the hallways. Staff looked over their shoulders. Officers kept their hands off their weapons. The authority they once wore like armor now felt like a fragile costume. Monica Hayes arrived early. Not in her wheelchair this time, but walking with a cane. Her coat was gone. She wore the same dark blue suit and black heels that had walked her through federal halls in Washington. Every step she took echoed with purpose. She carried 2 things that day, a file folder and a flash drive. Inside the courtroom, the usual morning shuffle of motions and hearings was interrupted when Monica approached the clerk's desk and handed over both items. This is an emergency petition to reopen the case of Malik Sanders, she said. Attached are 118 pages of evidence, including the original report surveillance footage, signed affidavits, and communications between local law enforcement and Judge Klein's office. The flash drive contains audio files, redacted police communications, and unsealed internal memos from the DOJ. The clerk looked stunned. You're submitting this pro se. No, Monica replied. I've reactivated my credentials and am acting under federal authority. This is now a joint investigation between the DOJ and the Office of Civil Rights, effective immediately. Word spread like fire through dry brush. People began filing into the courtroom, not just those involved in the case, but community members, activists, journalists. A local news crew rolled in, setting up quietly in the back. Judge Klein entered the courtroom to a room already in motion. For the first time in her career, she wasn't in control. She looked around confused by the crowd thrown off by the cameras. When she saw Monica seated at the front table, official paperwork spread neatly before her, her expression changed from confusion to panic. Clerk Klein said, adjusting her robe as she sat, "What is happening here?" The clerk hesitated, then said, "A federal motion's been submitted to reopen a closed juvenile case, Sanders Malik." "I already denied that motion years ago," Klein replied quickly, too quickly. Monica stood, and it was denied without proper review. No oversight, no legal justification. That denial is now being reviewed under federal scrutiny. Klein's mouth opened, then closed. She looked toward Officer Whitlow, who sat stiffly behind the prosecution table. The woman looked smaller now, paler. Her uniform didn't give her power anymore. Monica didn't stop. "Your Honor?" She said, the title now sounding like a formality rather than a show of respect. "We have obtained records showing direct communication between your office and the arresting officer, Dana Whitlow, 2 days before the original hearing. Those records include language indicating an intent to dismiss procedural errors in favor of expediting the case due to public pressure." "That's privileged internal discussion," Klein stammered. "Not if it influenced a court ruling and led to the unlawful incarceration of a minor," Monica replied. "We have the time-stamped emails. DOJ Ethics is reviewing them now." Klein's gavel hit the desk weaker this time. "I want this hearing postponed until proper channels." "No," Monica said, her voice steady. "For 15 years, Malik Sanders sat with no voice. We're not postponing anything." In the gallery, people leaned forward, holding their breath. Some recorded. Others just watched silently, willing the truth to stand taller than the bench. Whitlow shifted in her seat, uncomfortable under the weight of so many eyes. Then, to everyone's shock, she stood. "I want to say something," she muttered. Klein narrowed her eyes. Dana. But Whitlow stepped forward, took off her utility belt, and set it on the table. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I wrote the report. I did. But I was told to keep it short and make it stick. I didn't beat that boy, but I didn't stop it either. It was one of the older officers. I let it happen. I signed the paper because I thought it would disappear like the others. You could hear a pin drop. I was new, she added, but that doesn't matter. I was part of it. Gasps. One woman in the back covered her mouth. A man stood and walked out, unable to sit through the weight of it. Monica nodded slowly, then opened the folder again. I spoke with Malik's mother last night, she said. She's older now. She lives alone. Never remarried after her son was taken away. She thought the world forgot him. She held up a letter. She wrote this after his sentencing, never mailed it, found it in a drawer. It says, "They took my child and called it law. I pray God sees what men refuse to." The courtroom trembled with silence. Monica continued, "He was released when he turned 18, 5 years. No support, no counseling, no record expungement. He lives in another state now, homeless, still afraid of flashing lights." That was the turning point. Because this was no longer about paperwork or protocol. This was about a life damaged, discarded, and forgotten. The judge's shoulders sank slightly, not from guilt, from fear. I will need time to review." Monica cut her off gently. "You had 15 years. The next day, the courtroom was packed, not just with locals, but with national media, federal observers, civil rights attorneys. Monica had sparked something bigger than a reopened case. She had lit a fuse that could not be snuffed out. And for the first time in decades, the courthouse didn't feel like a fortress. It felt like a place where something real might happen. Monica sat at the front again, shoulders square, cane resting at her side. She wasn't alone anymore. On her left sat attorney Sheila Lawson from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. On her right, Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Gilbreth, young white, and surprisingly quiet. They weren't here to lead. They were here to back her up. Behind them sat citizens, black, brown, and white, some in suits, some in church clothes, some in work boots, all watching, all waiting. The hearing was no longer about reopening Malik Sanders' case. It had become a formal inquiry into systemic misconduct with sworn testimonies under oath. Monica had insisted the process be public. No sealed chambers, no quiet backroom deals. Let it be heard, she said, by the same people who were silenced. Judge Klein no longer presided. She'd been placed on temporary leave pending review. In her place sat a visiting federal judge, Judge Timothy Brandt, known for his straight-laced demeanor and no-nonsense tone. "We are here to determine whether Officer Dana Whitlow and former Judge Sandra Klein participated in a miscarriage of justice," Brandt said. "This is not a criminal trial yet, but it will determine the next step in federal proceedings." The word "yet" hung heavy in the room. Monica stood first. She didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. In 2010, she said, voice firm, a boy named Malik Sanders was arrested for resisting a law enforcement officer. The officer in question, Dana Whitlow, failed to document evidence. The child was injured in custody. No forensic evidence was gathered. The report was signed by Whitlow and reviewed by Judge Klein, who denied a motion to investigate injuries. This pattern matches at least 4 other juvenile cases in the same year, each involving black minors. All cases were sealed. All records were redacted. She turned to the judge. "I was a federal agent then. I raised questions and was told to stand down. I obeyed. I carry that shame." She stepped back. "But I do not carry it quietly anymore." Whitlow was called next. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her hands clasped in front of her like a schoolgirl caught cheating. A DOJ lawyer questioned her. "Did you witness Malik Sanders being injured in custody?" Whitlow swallowed. "Yes." "Did you intervene?" "No." "Did you report the injuries?" Not officially." "Why not?" Whitlow shifted in her seat. "I was told not to make waves. Told by my supervisor that the kid was looking for trouble and the paperwork should reflect that. And Judge Klein, she told me in private that she'd handle it, that it was best to move it along." That caused a stir in the gallery. Next, a former juvenile court clerk was brought in, an older black woman named Estelle Granger. She had retired 5 years ago, but remembered the Sanders case. "I knew something was wrong," she said, her voice cracking. "But when I asked about it, I was reassigned to file duty. Never touched a juvenile case again." Monica listened, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with the weight of vindication. She had feared for years that she'd imagined it, that Maybe she'd read too much into it, but now here were others. People who had also been afraid, people who were now speaking. Then the bombshell. Malik Sanders himself entered the courtroom. No longer a boy. Now a 29-year-old man with tired eyes and a scar that ran from his cheek to his jaw. He wore a faded suit and shoes that didn't quite fit, but he walked with quiet dignity. He stood in front of the room, looked at Monica, then looked straight at the judge. "I didn't ask to be part of any of this," he said, "but it's been inside me my whole life." He paused. "They put me in a cage when I was 14. I didn't even know what resisting arrest meant. I just asked why I was being stopped. I asked if I could call my mom. That's all. Next thing I knew, I was face down on the ground." A tear rolled down his cheek. "When I got out, I was angry. I hated everything. I lost years. I lost my place. Nobody believed me. Until now." He looked over at Monica. "I used to think nobody saw me. But she did. Even if it took time, she saw me." The entire courtroom was still. Even the reporters lowered their cameras. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Sanders." When Monica returned to the floor, her voice was softer, but no less sure. "This hearing isn't just about Dana Whitlow or Sandra Klein. It's about every room like this, every courtroom where a child's voice is silenced, every office where a file is pushed into a drawer and forgotten. We call it justice. But for some of us, it's just survival." The judge turned to the bench. "Based on the testimony and documents submitted, this court recommends the following immediate federal review of all juvenile cases handled under Judge Klein's jurisdiction from 2005 to 2015. Suspension of Officer Whitlow, pending internal affairs investigation. Official recommendation for civil and criminal charges where appropriate." There it was. The room didn't erupt in applause. This wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. Monica sat down, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding for 15 years. Around her, people nodded, some in tears. A few hugged. But there was no parade, no victory dance, just the sound of truth finally breaking through the silence. The courtroom emptied slowly, as if no one wanted to be the first to break the spell. Some people lingered in their seats, heads bowed processing. Others gathered quietly near the back to speak in hushed tones, reporters double-checking their notes, activists calling friends and contacts. Outside, the news vans hummed to life as anchors prepped for live coverage, but inside the courthouse, time moved differently now. Monica stayed seated at the front of the room. Her hands rested on the wooden table, palms open. Her cane leaned against the chair. Her shoulders sagged, not from weakness, but from the heavy release of finally putting down a burden she had carried far too long. Across the room, Malik Sanders stood beside Sheila Lawson and a social worker named Maria Jansen, who had come down from Chicago after hearing about the case. They talked softly. Malik's eyes kept drifting toward Monica. Every so often they met hers. There was no anger in his gaze, only a deep, quiet knowing. He walked over. "I never thought I'd see this day," he said. Monica looked up at him, the fine lines in her face softening. "Neither did I. I blamed everyone," he said, voice low. "My mom, the cops, the system, even myself." She nodded. "Of course you did." He looked down. "But I never thought someone would come back for me." Monica leaned forward, her voice like a whisper wrapped in steel. "I should have come back sooner. I owed you that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the faded photo she'd used in court, the one she had kept in her wallet all these years. Somehow he'd ended up with it. "I was scared of this picture," he said, "but I think I'll keep it now." They sat in silence together. Not uncomfortable silence, just a shared moment between two survivors of a long, unspoken war. Outside, protesters had begun to gather, not with rage, but with signs with chants of truth and accountability. Not a march of anger, but one of presence, of visibility, a public reminder. We are still watching. Dana Whitlow had been escorted out through a back entrance earlier that morning, stripped of her badge and placed on immediate leave. She hadn't fought it. In fact, before leaving the building, she'd asked to speak to Monica. She said she was sorry, Monica told Sheila later, but it was the kind of sorry that came too late. Not for me to carry. Klein, however, remained defiant even in suspension. Her attorney released a statement to the press later that day. Judge Klein has always upheld the law to the best of her ability. She awaits a fair and complete review. Monica read the statement on her phone and said nothing. That night, Monica returned to her quiet apartment on the south side of the city. The place was small, clean, and filled with memories, some good, some painful. On her coffee table were stacks of old case files yellowing with age marked with red ink, and questions she hadn't dared ask back then. She stared at them in silence, her tea gone cold beside her. Then she picked one up. It was a different name, a different story, but the same pattern. The system had more cracks than she remembered, and now she had no excuse not to look. Over the following week, Monica became a reluctant figure of national attention. Her face was on news broadcasts. Her testimony was quoted in op-eds. Civil rights groups reached out. Law schools asked her to speak. Politicians tried to stand beside her, hoping to share in the moment's shine. But Monica wasn't interested in spotlight. She met with DOJ officials behind closed doors. She worked with the Civil Rights Division to audit juvenile cases in multiple counties. She gave testimony for future hearings. She did the work, because for her, justice wasn't a one-time event. It was a choice, daily, costly, inconvenient. One morning, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple handwritten note. Because of you, I asked about my brother's case again. Turns out there were files missing. Thank you, Tasha. Another letter followed 2 days later, then another. People were waking up to their own stories. Some painful, some unresolved, but no longer hidden. And people were listening. Sheila Lawson called Monica a few weeks later. We've had over 300 inquiries from people trying to re-examine old juvenile convictions. You started something. Monica didn't respond right away. She was staring out her window watching kids play on the sidewalk below. I didn't start it, she said finally. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it. One Sunday afternoon, Monica visited an old friend, Marcus Ellis, a retired civil rights attorney and one of her early mentors. He'd marched in Selma, argued before federal judges in the 80s, been beaten, bruised, and still smiling. She brought him sweet tea and sat on his porch. I watched you on the news, he said, tipping his cap. Damn proud. I was scared, she admitted. He smiled. You're supposed to be. Bravery's not the absence of fear, it's just doing it anyway. She looked away. There's so much more to fix, Marcus. There always is. He sipped his tea. But you turn the lights on in a dark room, and once folks see, they can't unsee. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. As the sun dipped low, Marcus turned toward her. You gonna rest now? Monica looked up at the sky, then down at the manila folder in her lap. Not yet, she said. In the weeks that followed, the story of Monica Hayes and the case of Malik Sanders spread far beyond the courthouse. What began as a small moment of confrontation became a national point of reflection. TV panels discussed it, podcasts analyzed it, schools assigned essays about it. But in communities like the one Monica came from, it didn't feel like a headline. It felt like something finally breaking open. People started talking. Not just about Malik, but about their own children, their own records, their own stories that had been buried or ignored. Churches held town halls. Community centers posted Know Your Rights workshops. Formerly incarcerated youth spoke at schools. Something shifted. The DOJ announced a formal audit of juvenile justice systems in 3 counties. Whispers from other states began to rise. California, Texas, Georgia, all asking the same thing. How many Malik Sanders cases are still buried out there? In Monica's own neighborhood, the change was quieter but more personal. People greeted her differently now. Not with awe, but with respect, the kind that came from recognition, not just admiration. One afternoon, Monica sat at Johnson's Cafe, a small corner diner known for its peach cobbler and cornbread. The waitress, a young black woman named Chantel, brought her tea with a smile. I just want to say thank you, Ms. Hayes, she said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening too close. My little brother, he got picked up last year for something he didn't do. They scared him into a plea deal. He's only 16. Your story made my mama ask to see the paperwork again. Monica reached out and gently touched her hand. Good. Don't stop asking. At City Hall, council members who had once been silent on policing practices were now under pressure. Citizens showed up to public meetings quoting Monica's testimony. They wanted answers. They wanted policies. They wanted accountability. No one was above questioning anymore. Officer Dana Whitlow resigned from the police department 2 months after the hearing. The official reason was personal health and family considerations, but everyone knew the truth. She had been offered a choice: face formal internal affairs charges or step down quietly. She chose the latter. She gave no interviews, no apologies, and disappeared from the public eye. Judge Sandra Klein was not so lucky. After a thorough federal review, she was formally removed from the bench. Her judicial license was suspended indefinitely. A statement from the Judicial Conduct Board read simply, "Justice must not only be fair, it must appear fair." The court failed in both. Monica read the statement with a flat expression. It wasn't satisfaction, it wasn't even closure, but it was a step. She received letters, so many that she had to buy a small filing cabinet just to keep track. Some were simple thank yous. Others were from people who still hadn't found justice, but who now believed they could try again. One letter came from a teacher in Baltimore. It said, "I teach 8th grade civics, and we watched your hearing in class. One of my students asked, why did it take her so long to speak up? I told him the truth, it takes time to get brave, but once you do it, can shake the ground." The one that stuck with Monica most came from a woman in Mississippi. "My son was arrested at 13. He died in juvenile custody. They told me it was suicide, but I've always known better. Your story made me get back up. I'm requesting his records again. Whatever happens, thank you for reminding me I have a right to ask." Monica carried that letter in her purse. Not everyone was grateful. Some voices loud familiar pushed back. Local TV commentators accused her of trying to politicize justice. A retired judge wrote an op-ed titled, "Courts Are Not Battlefields." One sheriff's union president called her an example of federal overreach driven by guilt and personal vendetta. But Monica had learned something about silence. Once you break it, it's easier to break again. She didn't respond with interviews or social media battles. She responded with work. She partnered with civil rights lawyers to review dozens of sealed juvenile cases. She helped launch a mentorship program for young Black investigators. She began speaking at training academies, offering testimony not just on law, but on courage. It was during one of those sessions, a quiet early morning seminar in a modest conference room, that a young white officer approached her afterward. Nervous, hands shaking. "I wanted to say thank you," he said. Monica looked up. "For what?" "For being honest. I don't know if I've ever seen someone like you in this job. I mean, not just Black, but brave enough to come back." She offered a quiet smile. "Then do something with it." He nodded. "I will." Not all the echoes were public. Some came in late-night phone calls from other retired agents. Some came in quiet confessions from judges who admitted they'd pushed through cases they shouldn't have. The system had been protecting itself for so long it had stopped protecting people, but now the cracks were showing. And Monica had become the crowbar. Still, she didn't consider herself a hero. Heroes ride off into the sunset. Monica stayed behind, digging through files, walking slowly but purposefully into buildings where she was once unwelcome. One afternoon at a library downtown, she was reviewing documents when a little girl approached her. She had 2 braids and wide, curious eyes. "Are you the lady who helped that boy?" she asked. Monica looked up surprised. "I saw you on the computer," the girl added. "At school." Monica smiled gently. "Yes, I guess that's me." The little girl looked down at her shoes, then back up. "I want to be like you." Monica leaned closer, her voice soft and warm. "You don't have to be like me," she said. "Just keep your eyes open, and don't let anyone tell you to look away." The girl nodded and ran off her braids, bouncing behind her. Monica sat back in her chair, a half smile playing on her lips. The past had not disappeared. The work was far from over, but something had shifted. Not just in the courtroom, not just in policy. In people, Monica Hayes didn't walk away from justice like it was some finished project she could set aside. She lived with it, every day. Not in glory, not in fame, but in quiet determination. In every file she reopened, every child she fought for, every tired mother who now had a reason to hope again. She knew her role was never to fix everything, just to make sure the next person didn't feel so alone when they tried. And that's what justice really is, a long, winding walk you take one step at a time, even when your legs ache, even when your spirit is tired, even when the world tells you it's too late. Monica had once believed that silence was safety, that staying quiet kept you from losing what little you had. But she learned the hard way that silence is its own kind of surrender. And you have a voice. Maybe you saw something once and didn't speak up. Maybe you signed a paper that didn't feel right. Maybe you looked away because the truth hurt too much. It's not too late. You can still ask questions. You can still show up. You can still tell the truth even if your voice shakes. Monica didn't become powerful because she was perfect. She became powerful because she returned, because she admitted her failure and chose not to let it be the final word. That kind of courage doesn't belong in courtrooms alone. It belongs in neighborhoods, in schools, at dinner tables. In every conversation where someone says, "That's just how things are," and someone else dares to say, "No, it shouldn't be." So I ask you now, who have we forgotten? Who have we allowed to vanish in silence? And what will it take for us, not the courts, not the politicians, but us to bring them back? Because justice doesn't begin with laws. It begins with us. Right now, if Monica's story moved something and you share it, tell someone. Start the conversation. Look at that old story you tried to forget. Revisit that moment you once let slide. Encourage someone you love to stand up even if it feels like it's too late. And if you're tired, rest. But don't stop. There are so many more stories waiting to be told, and together we can carry them forward. Thank you for reading. If this story touched you, please like, share, and comment below. Let your voice join Monica's. Let it echo further. And don't forget to subscribe to the Black Women channel, where truth has a voice and silence is no longer the final word.